Chapter 15. The following week, Theo had tried patching things up, but the arguments persisted. He felt that the pressure of study was partly to blame for the friction between them, which was why he was looking forward to the holidays. Maybe then they could sort things out. But several days before, Vanessa changed her mind. "I think we should spend Christmas apart," she suggested, and, even though she said it without conviction, Theo wasn't in the mood for discussion. If time apart was needed, so be it. He was tired of arguing. He hadn't wanted to discuss his problems with the Barkers, either, but because they had been expecting both Vanessa and him to house sit while they holidayed in Tuscany, he had to say something to Mr. Barker, who then took it upon himself to suggest that Theo be more patient and a little more sensitive when it came to women. Theo listened out of respect, but on this occasion did not find the advice helpful. When the Barkers left for their holiday, Theo set himself a strict schedule. Using Mr. Barker's study on the first floor, for good measure Theo took down the young unmask that was propped up in one corner of the desk. As a Christian, he was not supposed to believe in the power of such things, but he wasn't going to take chances. The British might be safe messing around with festival masks, but not him. He also removed Mr. Barker's journals that lay strewn on the windowsill, dusted their faded covers, and stacked them neatly to flatten their curling corners. The room was cluttered with history books, but the desk faced the window, away from the mess, overlooking the back garden where he would often find himself staring and thinking of home. And sometimes he would think of nothing in particular as he watched the blackbirds hopping across the lawn, pecking in search of worms. Eventually he would look back at his books and, if he still could not concentrate, he would stand up and wander around the house. He never grew tired of browsing T.H.C. Barker's bookshelves. In addition to history, Mr. Barker owned a large collection of musical scores, mainly classical, and some jazz. Theo remembered his first visit with Vanessa to the Barkers and their way in which Mr. Barker had spoken to her at length about his collection. Theo remembered feeling a little envious about their intimate tete-a-tete on a subject he didn't know much about. There were other books in the house in German, French, and Italian, which were Isabella's, an impressive assortment of European and Russian literary greats, including a complete collection of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Theo admired this vast assortment of books and the way the Barkers had decorated their house with a mix of Italian and English paintings, as well as the African bronzes and carvings that Mr. Barker had collected over the years. Theo imagined owning a house like the Barkers one day, a home tastefully decorated and filled with books, a home which could be shared with friends in the same way as the Barkers shared theirs. Isabella liked beautiful things, just like Vanessa, who had transformed his own rooms with her thoughtful touches, the silver candlestick holders, the Spanish mirror, and the warm cashmere blanket that she had given him only last week. On New Year's Eve, Theo awoke feeling particularly homesick. H.C. thought of Tund in Bradford, and Ike and Bolai in London, preparing for the night's parties, and he pictured the scene back home in Nigeria. Women would be pounding yam, and palm wine would be flowing while the irresistible beats of high life and juju would be calling dancers to their feet. He began to feel that everybody except him would be in the party spirit, and so, to rectify the situation, Theo took out his favorite Ike Dero vinyl and filled the house with his music. THCN, on THC spur of THC moment, he decided to cook. by mid-morning. He was off to buy a chicken from the covered market. Realizing he didn't know what spices his mother used, he asked an Indian stallholder for advice. She sold him 2 powders carefully sealed in wax paper. One marked cumin, the other turmeric. Theo smiled to himself at the thought of a culinary adventure, but, as soon as he got back to the house, the novelty of the idea had worn off. He had never made stew in his life, so what did he think he was doing? Trying to be a modern man? Everyone knew that women were the natural cooks, not men. Besides, even if his chicken were a success, what joy would there be in eating alone? He thought of the time 2 years ago when Christine had prepared a banquet of his favorite food. She had cooked yam with egusi, gar and akara, and had invited all the African students in Oxford, as well as a few cousins from London. And that night, after they had cleared everything away and were all alone, they had started kissing. But it was still too painful to remember these things, so he tried to concentrate instead on looking for something in which to prepare his pasty white bird. He looked everywhere, but found no black pots of the type his mother owned, so he decided to use the largest stainless steel pot. Now what? How was he going to know when the chicken was properly cooked? None of Isabella's recipe books contained a chicken stew recipe. There was chicken soup, coq au vin, chicken volume au vents, coronation chicken, but no chicken stew, which meant he would have to guess. He had just finished chopping the bird into irregular chunks, 2 of which managed to slip off the breadboard and sail across the kitchen floor, when the doorbell rang. Oh no! This would be one of Isabella's friends sent to check on him. He must make sure nobody came into the kitchen and saw the mess. Opened their door expecting Fiona or Anne, but instead there was Vanessa, and in his excitement he forgot that his hands were slimy with chicken. As he reached to kiss her, she turned her face and the kiss landed clumsily on her cheek. "Come in," he said awkwardly. She sniffed the air and so did he. "Yo!" He panicked, running back to the kitchen. He pulled the pan from the ring, tipping it dangerously and nearly scalding himself. He stood helpless, wondering what to do next. Vanessa, who had followed him in, was smiling. "Mr. A," she smiled, "what are you doing? And what does yeho mean?" "TT means oh bugger." Theo laughed. "And this is my lousy attempt at ing. Who are you cooking for?" The smile vanished from her face. "Were you expecting someone?" "Only you, Vanessa." "Yes," he said, tossing her a tea towel. "And now you can dry the dishes." "But I'm not staying," she added quickly. "Then I'll have to entice you with a cup of tea," he said, knowing without looking that she was smiling. She could say what she liked, he knew her well enough to be sure she had not come all this way simply to say hello. He filled the kettle, switched it on and returned to the stove to fiddle with his pot, while watching her from the corner of his eye. The heat from the oven had misted their kitchen window, and she had taken off her cardigan. Static made her blouse stick to her body, and, each time she tried to pull it away, the material leapt back, clinging more tightly to her breasts. He smiled and stepped closer, pretending to need a spoon in one of the drawers near where she stood, and when he brushed against her back she stopped what she was doing. He waited for a moment before gently pulling her hair from her shoulders to plant a line of kisses down there, back of her neck. Slowly, she turned towards him, and quickly he lifted her up onto the counter, knocking over one of Isabella's teapots. They tugged clumsily at each other's clothes. Nothing else mattered, not the teapot, not the whistling kettle, and not the angry chicken spitting bubbles from its ill-fitting lid. That evening they devoured a box of Ritz cheese crackers, a jar of Heinz pick lay and the rest of Isabella's Christmas fruit cake. They were clearing the plates when Vanessa reached for his arm and made him sit. "Theo, we can't keep doing this. Making up and patching things over." "I know," he said, but he wished she hadn't brought it up, not now at least. Not after what they had just shared, not on New Year's Eve. "But you said you wanted a break and now you've come back, and we've done all this, so I'm confused." "I didn't want a break. Couldn't you see that?" And then she stood up again and began gathering the plates. "No, wait, Vanessa." This time he reached for her arm. "I'm sorry for being insensitive, and I'm sorry for burying myself in my work. But it's not about work, Theo, it's about the way we talk to each other. It's about the way you're always so critical of my views." "Yes, you are, Theo. Every time we talk about religion, on women's rights, you've always got something negative to say. It's as if I'm always saying something wrong." "But can't I tell you how I see things?" "Yes, but don't judge me at the same time." Did he judge her? Maybe she was right. Perhaps in an unconscious way he did judge her. He thought a lot these days about how his family would view Vanessa. He had also wondered how she would feel in a context where every one was expected to believe in God, whatever God, at least a God. Back home, women were expected to put children before profession and do the womanly things like cooking, something he knew Vanessa did not agree with. "Aren't you going to say something?" she asked. "You okay? Perhaps I do so unconsciously, and if I do then I'm sorry, but it's because one think of home, and when you talk about women having professions. Is that it? You think I don't want to have children?" "I don't know." "Then why don't you just ask me?" "You never ask. How am one supposed to know what you think if you never talk? Just because one defend a woman's right not to have children doesn't mean that's my own choice. Of course I want chill underscore. Of course I do, silly you. Come." She tugged at his arm, dragging him from the chaos in the kitchen, leading him to the lounge. "Away. I love you, you know." "How much?" he teased. "How much do you love me?" "Too much," she smiled, holding him tightly. "I'll find some music and then I'll show you just how much. And you can make a fire." She chose Nina Simone, and before he had found the matches she was already dancing towards him. "Love me or leave me." He reached for her, but she pushed him away. "Vanessa," he pleaded, trying again to hold her, but she wouldn't have it. She sang in a whisper, flirting with him until she drew close enough for their hips to touch, and only then did she let him rest his hands on her waist. She kept on dancing, lifting her hips from side to side as she led the way, backwards, to the sofa.